I don't think anything, when it comes to the future of restaurants or restaurant spaces or restaurant experiences, I don't think anything has to be held to yesterday's standards. And yet, if you think about it philosophically or creatively, anytime we think about the future, we do it based on what we know, right? So what that tends to lead to is what I call iteration. So whether we're looking at new technology, whether we're just thinking about new ideas, we tend to build upon yesterday. And that's cool. So the way that I define iteration is doing the same things but better or cooler. But innovation is doing new things that create new value. And the only way to do that is to think differently about the industry, to look outside of the industry. And that's what I want to share with you today, is just ideas to get you thinking differently. Because if not you, then who? Because there's certainly a lot of that out-of-the-box thinking or blue ocean thinking or design thinking, but that tends to sort of hold us back from possibilities. All the while, customers are changing, markets are changing. And it's those people, it's you. If we look to people and how they're changing, what inspires them, what they love, what they don't love, how their relationship with this device influences their behavior, then we can find opportunities to deliver the experiences that people want, and that people want to share, and that people want to have again and again. I'm a Disney geek, and excellent, I'm not alone. Times are always going to change. I'm pretty sure that everybody is familiar with the term digital transformation in this room, as if there's an end goal, as if we're going to digitally transform and one day wake up as this new digital butterfly. It's a constant. Digital transformation is an infinite game, which means that we have to build internally that agility, that creativity, to constantly have this conversation about what needs to be different moving forward. It's not going to stop. Yet when we think about the world, it tends to kind of be rooted in this false narrative. I mean, who in this room starts their everyday workday like this? And yet it is portrayed in movies and TV shows as if this is reality. It's more like this. Or like this. And so those norms, those behaviors are so different that this is what we have to build for, is not just what we think normal is, but what normal is and how normal evolves. And I call this digital Darwinism. The more as human beings that we have access to new technologies, the more we change. And the more we change, the more markets change, the more societies change. And as that happens, then everything around it has to either evolve or not. It has to either adapt or die. And over the years, that was called creative destruction. But now with digital, everything has been sort of accelerated. And so it's a choice that we all have. Where do we want to be in the mix? Do we constantly want to try to catch up? Or do we want to figure out ways to get ahead? And it's not just a one-time decision, it's an ongoing decision. And every single industry is being disrupted because of digital Darwinism. So if iteration is doing the same things but better, and innovation is creating new value, disruption then is doing the new things that make the old things obsolete. And this becomes important because once you taste something new, it changes your standard for experience. And there's no limit then to that inspiration that we can draw from. So for example, in the financial industry, there's a great report called the Millennial Disruption Index. And in that last report, they asked millennials, who do you expect to bank with in the next 10 years? And it was a really important question because most of them were banked simply because of their parents or simply because they had to be, not because it was really a choice. Like not that it was really strategic and thoughtful. And in 10 years, they said that they expect to bank with Google, Amazon, or Apple, right? None of which are banks. But it gives you sort of that perspective. Because if you think about it, Amazon, Apple, and Google are all lifestyle companies. They're part of your everyday life. They're all technology companies for sure, but you do different aspects of your daily routines through those companies and the devices that they make. And so that's what we have to think about. What are the restaurants that we're going to go to in the next 10 years? Who owns them? Google, Amazon, and Apple? It's that ideology that we have to think about. Because when we think about the future of a restaurant, we think about restaurants. We think about space, we think about blueprints, we think about ecosystems and infrastructure, and so we build iteratively from that. Even with the coolest new technology, we're building on yesterday's ideas and definitions of what a restaurant is. And this is true for banks, this is true for sporting events, this is true for every industry. There was a book that came out many years ago. It was a book that actually really changed my thinking. It's called The Experience Economy by Pine and Gilmore, and it just actually got refreshed, and it's a book I highly recommend. But they talked about the product and the service, for example here, of not just being food or the restaurant, but the experience. And when the book came out, they used Chuck E. Cheese as an example of an experience. And as a parent, I don't know, I don't think I've ever left Chuck E. Cheese saying, gosh, that was an amazing experience. But it was an experience nonetheless. So now we're starting to see this iteration play out in QSR, in traditional restaurants. I mean, nothing says service and innovation like a good, friendly kiosk, right? Welcome. Please touch this screen. So the business model used to be all about putting butts in seats, right? And I had a conversation with a good friend of mine a couple years ago. We published a report called The State and Future of Digital Marketplaces. And in this report, at the end of it, we talked about, for example, QSR and restaurants. Like what is the design of a restaurant if you no longer cater to just butts and seats as a business model? What if it was about food in belly, right? And not that that's the sexiest tagline, but that's really, at the end of the day, what it's about. It's about catering to an outcome. It's about catering to this new hybrid model that has to contend with on-premise, off-premise, order ahead, delivery, all of these different things to reach people that you want to have in your restaurant today, but also people who don't really want to be in your restaurant at all. Right? So a year ago, when we were having to define what ghost kitchens were or what cloud kitchens were, and now they're everywhere. I mean, for better or for worse. I mean, most of the time when we read about ghost kitchens, it's about health code violations. But the idea of it, though, is radically transforming how we need to think about not just what's our cloud kitchen strategy. It's actually not good enough. It's actually about serving people that we didn't reach before, or even knowing people that we didn't know before. It's about thinking about distribution. It's about thinking about consumerism. It's about thinking aspirationally beyond what our traditional footprint used to be. And by the way, it's not just for restaurants. It's true for all retail, right? I mean, the premise of that value proposition used to be localization. Where you were determined how far you could reach. Well, now, those kitchens become satellites for your potential. But it isn't just about what you do with them, it's about how other people are thinking about them. And I thought, it was going to be inevitable that the infrastructure applications, so whether they're delivery or they're BOPIS, order ahead, that at some point, we as brands were going to compete against them, for better or for worse. I think it was a horrible decision, but it was one that was made nonetheless. For example, the American Eclectic Burger is not even a real restaurant. It's owned by a delivery service through ghost kitchens. And they've created a brand, they've created a menu, and the consumer doesn't know the difference. They don't know that this is owned by the app that they're actually ordering the food from. And so that means that our competitors are also our partners. And so when we think creatively, we also have to think creatively beyond sort of this new mode of survival that a lot of these apps have. They're not just thinking differently, they're thinking about ways, and it's horrible to think about, but they're thinking about ways to actually compete against you while helping you reach new consumers. Not only that, but some of their business practices have been questionable. It's probably a nice way to put it. I mean, if you look at the upper right-hand tweet, take a look at that thread if you have a moment, and she details how her restaurant was replicated online by delivery companies, replicated the menu, cooked through ghost kitchens, and it wasn't even her. So now here we are, 2020, thinking about the future, and I would like you to think about possibilities. I mean, that's all we have. I mean, of course we have to build upon what we know and what we have. Iteration is not a bad thing, it's a good thing. But we have to add it in terms of a formula to innovation, right? Doing the same things better, creating new value, because together we can be the disruptors instead of the disrupted. So that means that space itself can be reimagined. But also, this is space. And there's no distinction between the two in today's consumer. The line is blurred, and we have to think about these things seamlessly. This is a secret restaurant that United Airlines operates out of Newark. I thought it was super cool. You have to know about it first, then have to get an invitation to come to it. So, of course, I needed to get an invitation. And then I sat there. It had a great view. But everything about that restaurant is done through an iPad. You order, someone brings you your drink, someone brings you your food, but the experience itself sucked. You had to pay every single time you wanted something. So you want a glass of wine, you choose it. Lord knows you're having dinner and who knows what fingers touch those screens, but nonetheless, you order the glass of wine, you pay for it, you tip, it comes. When you're ready to order your meal, same thing. Not the best experience, right? And so we're building upon space with all of these new technologies in the way that we think contextually about a restaurant. Well, robots are a thing, so let's have robots deliver your food. Or let's have robots make your pizza. This one's kind of cool, though, to be honest with you. It's called Creator. It's in San Francisco. And this entire machine, it's one of those things that's so addictive to just watch it happen. It's soothing in its own way, but it'll make your cheeseburger for you. So this is iteration. These are all classic examples of using new technologies to deliver the same experience, but more automated, maybe better. And now we're starting to look at, well, what does iteration and innovation look like when it comes to delivery and order ahead? Right? Soon, I hope not too soon, but soon, we're going to have these things dropping off your meals. Right? I got to go to a restaurant that was hosted just randomly, just demonstrate technology, not that this was going to be a thing, but that was hosted by IBM's Watson division, and Watson is its big sort of deep thinking AI division that they took all kinds of ingredients and then they partnered with famous chefs to then use AI to think differently about how those ingredients could come together in ways that human beings have actually never even thought of. And so you get these ridiculous outcomes where they said scientifically this would actually pair with this, and then it was the chef's job to think creatively about how we were going to make a dish out of that. And so the entire series of courses were things that you'd never even thought would go together that actually paired famously together. This is where we start to think about what those new experiences could look like, because at the end of the day we have to cater to a super selfish consumer. I call us accidental narcissists, because the phone, the apps, the services we use tell us and remind us every single day that we are the most important person in the universe. And that is what we're trying to cater to. Someone who is constantly distracted, someone who is constantly on, someone who is constantly self-important. And that changes the game for what a great experience could be. Because we're designing experiences based on who we think the consumer was, when they have in fact radically evolved because of the smartphone. The smartphone has been the most disruptive technology that we've seen. I mean, of course, the internet has been transformative, but the smartphone itself has actually changed humanity in how we behave, how we think, how we communicate. Right? And you think about how the smartphone has changed everything, and when's the last time you visited a restaurant website and you said, gosh, that was such an amazing website? Most of the time, they're still stuck in the 90s. And then if you think about the technology that sort of makes a restaurant work, it's still sort of also stuck in past experiences. So it's not just consumers, but it's also employees who have to think about, well, that's not how I operate. I operate in a world where there's actually sidewalks with 2 different lanes that exist. I want this sidewalk everywhere, by the way. We live in a world where Maslow's hierarchy of needs have changed substantially. Whether we have connectivity, whether we have power. I mean, this is the consumer. These are the things that they care about and they think about. I mean, if you want to have fun, you can order fake power outlet stickers from Amazon and just place them around and watch people go nuts when they realize that they can't charge their phone. Right? Do you remember the exact moment when Uber disrupted the taxi industry? No. Because it wasn't a moment, it was time. It changed over time. And Uber's actually over 10 years old now. We still sort of talk about it as this startup disrupting the taxi industry. It's actually had a long time. Or Amazon, for example, has been disrupting the retail industry for over 20 years. It's not just the technology, though. It's the outcome that I want us to think about when we strategize about the future of restaurants. Because it's the behavior that changed that's most important. Right? Once you have that experience, for in this case, integrated, convenient, once you have that experience, it's the standard for everything that you want. One of the things that I studied was how long is too long to wait for an Uber before you open the Lyft app. And I studied that over the years to demonstrate how impatient consumers were getting. And in New York, that number is 6 minutes. So if you see a car is further than 6 minutes out, you're just instinctively going to open another app, because why would you wait more than 6 minutes for a car to come to you to take you where you need to go without asking you where you need to go? Right? Because at some point in our life, that was not good enough. So Uber in Sydney, for example, advertises that the average pickup time is 3 minutes and 37 seconds. But if you keep going with how much we've changed beyond just becoming impatient, it's the behaviors that we want to cater to when it comes to experience design. It isn't just space. We don't think about it as a restaurant first. We think about it as that consumer experience first, for a consumer that can't wait more than 3 minutes and 37 seconds for an Uber. But it continues. Nobody saw this coming. People are calling Ubers instead of ambulances when they need to go to the emergency room. Because it's faster and cheaper. I feel for Uber drivers. Like, I didn't know I was going to be a first responder. I was just getting into this to make some extra income. Right, so it's the consumer behavior that we have to design for that we don't even know today. Right? Post Malone made headlines when he ordered 10,000 Popeyes biscuits through Postmates. And I was talking to a founder of a startup in the Bay Area who was saying that he had an employee come and ask for a raise, not because he was doing such a stellar job, but because he needed the extra income because he was spending $1,500 a month on Uber Eats and DoorDash. And this friend of mine said, well, have you thought about cooking or making your lunch or making your dinner? No, who does that? Right, it was easier to ask for a raise than to actually think differently about how you eat. But that's what we're catering to. When you open an app, for example, to get delivery, half of the people know the restaurant they want to go to. The other half don't. They're open to exploration. Right? And it's the right side of this, the people who are open to discovery, that we have to think about. And this is actually where startups or where delivery services or order ahead applications, they see these statistics and they know, well, hey, with a simple ghost kitchen, we can compete with a clever name and a clever menu. But at the end of the day, it's also still about the experience. People still want to have that delicious food, to have it be convenient, to have it be on time. I published a report with a company called Rakuten Ready recently that looked at buying ahead or ordering ahead and picking up in store. And it was super interesting. We hired a bunch of secret shoppers around the country to go and just document the experience of everything from ordering ahead to parking to picking it up, and also why. Why would you do this instead of delivery? A lot of it was convenience and money, but also it was about sort of controlling the experience. But everybody had the same complaint. Every aspect of the experience, whether it was parking or walking into the store or finding the line or talking to a human being or finding your food or getting food that was fresh and ready for you when you showed up, all of those were problems because they weren't necessarily thought of from an innovative perspective. They just were thought of from an iteration perspective. And by the way, the benchmark was once someone parked, they wanted to be back in their car within 2 minutes. An almost impossible standard, but yet it is the reality. That Uber, I can't wait more than 6 minutes mentality. So the way I think about design is that we're trying to figure out restaurants for people that vomit rainbows. Right? This is a consumer who communicates differently than we communicate, than the entire construct of how restaurants were designed in the first place. So we have to think differently. Our experience has to perform against customer expectations, not even just in the restaurant industry, but just in everything. What do they hold as the standard for excellence? The good news is that we live in a world where data is everywhere, and we have AI and machine learning platforms and tools that can help us make sense of that data, but we have to ask different questions in order to get these types of insights. And do we understand the future of how the industry is unfolding, and are we prepared? Because we're now essentially catering to a connected consumer or to a now customer where impatience is a virtue, where the pillars of engagement are actually built differently than the pillars and the foundations that we know of today. Especially the last two. People want things personalized, and they want things to be absolutely native to the experience. So if I pick up a phone and I order ahead, or if I look at your restaurant's menu, or if I read about your restaurant, or if I read about reviews, or if I walk in and whatever that experience is, it has to be native. It has to feel like it's just part of one big narrative. And as we start to ask these different questions, as we start to explore data, as we start to look outside of our industry to see what it is that people hold as the standard for experiences, we get the answers. And they usually take us in new directions, and this is why innovation can be so scary or challenging for organizations, because they essentially do push you in new directions outside of your traditional constructs and also outside of our comfort zones. But that's where the answers lie. And in all of my research, whether it's digital transformation, customer experience, innovation, whatever it is, customer experience, service innovation, design innovation, experience innovation, they're all competitive advantages. And they're also infinite games. Design an experience once, evolve that experience, and continually look for what we call in Silicon Valley jumping the curve, because everything becomes finite. And once you hit sort of peak experience, you have to jump to the next thing. And they can happen in parallel. Every aspect of what we do can be reimagined, from the bag, delivery, to pickup, to thinking about that personalization, thinking about the app, parking, in-store experiences, drive-thrus. I mean, everything is open to reimagination now. Think about that consumer who's trying to just simply say, Alexa, order this because people can't be bothered to take more time to research something. I mean, it's just a reality. The way I think about it is the prioritization for innovation isn't just customer experience or CX. It's actually putting an apostrophe S on it, the customer's experience. What is it that they hold as necessary? What is it that they don't know they need, but once they have it, they can't live without it? Customer experience has been proven over and over again, once you put it in context, to be the number one catalyst to innovation because it's a unifier. It brings people together across functions. It brings data together across systems. We're making decisions, sort of the betterment for that entire experience, because that's what customer experience is. It's the sum of every engagement that someone has with your organization. And those experiences, if you just take that word and get to the root definition of it, is an emotional reaction to a moment. And that's what we have when we look at the menu, when we look at the site, when we look at the app, when we get the food, when we eat, when we taste, when we talk to service providers, when we meet the staff, when we get that cocktail. Those are all experiences. They're all, each and every one of them, emotional reactions to those moments. And those emotional reactions are essentially left to chance right now because they're not articulated, they're not designed. Unless you go to Disneyland, where, for example, every aspect of the experience is designed. The concrete, the placement of the trash cans, how people talk to you when you're in the park. And that's the way I like to think about experience design, is what if it was like a Disney movie, or what if it was like a Disney park, where you took the storyboard and we imagine what those experiences would be like in every moment where you touch a consumer, digitally and physically. How would you then change the narrative? Because in that scenario, technology becomes an enabler for storytelling, not the other way around. Technology isn't the experience. Technology is part of the narrative that creates that experience. Because those experiences become memories. And memories, think about it. We live in a world where, for better or for worse, people are reading reviews, whether it's Yelp, whether it's Travelocity, whatever it is. Those experiences that people have are shared. And they're validated in the next person who reads them in order to make a decision. So the experiences that people have, the memories that people have, become the brand, become the foundation then of what people expect or what people would love. And as you heard last night, sometimes we have to look outside of our industry. These digitally native companies are coming out of nowhere and reimagining industries that no one thought about in terms of innovation. Like, who goes to bed at night and says, you know, when I wake up tomorrow, I'm going to completely disrupt the mattress industry? Yet that's exactly what's happening. Every single industry is open to reimagination. And in these cases, as if you could start from scratch. If you open an app, for example, like Panera, and they start to learn using AI and machine learning what you order, they can create personalized menus that are just unique to you. So you'll see sandwiches, for example, that no one else would see. Or if you look at Domino's, for example, thinking like a tech company, using technology to enable better experiences, whether you love them or not. They've created an organization where IT and marketing and innovation and data are all part of one group now. So I'll leave you with this, because I'm out of time, but I will send this to you if you'd like. These are the 6 pillars of CX innovation that I actually believe that we have to think about in terms of our daily routine, as part of our everyday infrastructure, as part of the infinite game for thinking creatively around experience design as the source of innovation. Because I believe that if we're waiting for someone to tell us what to do, we're on the wrong side of innovation. Nobody has the answers, and that's what makes this such a magical moment. Because every single one of us in this room play a role in what the future can look like, and that is what is most exciting, is that you have a say in what the future of the restaurant industry looks like, all in the name of delivering a better, lasting consumer experience that becomes a memory that they love, that they share, And that becomes the brand, experience design. Thank you very much.